Hello, I've renamed myself for this video. I'm in love with my remit, okay? And obviously, I banged on here on this channel quite some time recently about how people hide behind remits, okay? And often that's a question of people above them pushing down and saying, no, your remit's this, okay? And that's not very nice, but that happens quite a lot. No blame there. But sometimes it's the people at the top of an organization who hide behind a remit, or at least say don't make much effort to think about things which may challenge their remit. Okay, so remits are there for a reason to have legal accountability, for have to have a contract of employment that's clear. Okay, but no, they're not set in stone. There's always ways to change remits. You don't want to have to kind of ignore one or work around one. I'm lucky I don't have one. No, but I'm not accountable to anybody except Almighty God. So that that makes me a difficult person to deal with because um I can focus on what I think is right. Okay. But let's say you have a remit, you have a salary, you have a family. You can't just like do what I'm doing and go off on one and go around and then go around upsetting people saying that you have to do something for people in need when they clearly feel they can't do any more. Okay, but what can you do in that case? Well, if you have the remit, you have the contract, you have the job, you have experience, you have qualifications, that means you have contacts, okay? And you can say you make a decision and think, well, this person's coming to me for a cause of justice and he cares and I agree with him in my heart, okay? But I can't help him because it's for my remit. But at the same time, I can't identify anybody else with a remit or somebody willing to use their remit to help him. Okay, so there may be a problem, which happens a lot in whistleblowing, that issues fall between the cracks. And that's why you have whistleblowing policies in companies that not you can't absolutely bad actors will employ lawyers and no end of people to investigate remits so that they can find a way to operate in the void, okay? But if it's in more or less you went into that profession to help the kind of person who's complaining to you and you're saying you haven't got remit, well just think, well, they've come to you because they trust you, because they thought that you're employed and you had the experience to do it, okay? And you realize that you could, in fact, you could do it, right? You could do it if you had the remit. Now maybe that's the point, okay? Just think to yourself, if I had the remit, would I think, well, yeah, let's do this. I have the experience, I have everything I need to take care of this. Okay, if I had the remit, and I seem to be the right person for it, or at least working with all these other people. Okay, so at that point you think, well, I'm a Christian. Okay, or whatever, I'm a good person, and I can't just leave that person alone, even if they're an annoying lawyer like me. Okay, or someone who's a member of Opus Dei seems to have a lot of resources to make people's lives difficult. Okay, and doesn't care too much about the church. All right, I understand that, all that. All right. So if you can put that to one side just to hear me out in this video, just saying what is it I can do? Okay, can I call up people? Can I have a little conversation? Can I see what's happening over there? Can I work around it without breaching anybody's remit? Having personal conversations with people that might loosen things, okay? Because if something's going wrong, it's normally that somebody's doing something wrong and they just need some help to say, yeah, I'm doing it wrong and I'm sorry, I'll stop doing it. And the police are really, really good at that, okay? That's what the police do because police don't want to spend, if it was, I mean, not, there's good and bad everywhere, but good policemen, it's not going to want to spend all day long in their office doing paperwork to do a case when they could just ring up somebody and or go around and see somebody and use the human touch. And also, if you've got that authority that your remit gives you, and you do contact somebody and saying somebody said something bad about you or that you're doing something wrong, I've got this remit. Okay, well you can then suss them out. Okay, are they going to say to you, well, yeah, I respect what you do, but you don't actually. I've investigated in detail your remit, and you can't act here. I'm sorry to say. Okay, all right. Well, if they do that, what does that tell you about who they are? They weren't that interested in hearing about the cause of justice. They weren't saying, "Oh God, I have to help you on that," or they weren't honest about that. They were just saying, "I can't help," and actually, you can't help either because you're limited in your remit. And sorry, there's nothing we can do. And is it really that bad? What they're saying about us? Come on. After all, we're Catholics. We've got We've got approved by the Catholic Church. I found as a saint with all these other saints on in the process. So how can you impeach our credibility? Yeah, surely that person is the one that's really you've got to think hard about. Why are they complaining to us? Disgruntled ex-members, people with access to grind. Okay, why don't you just focus on them instead? You know, and we'll leave you in peace. We'll leave you in peace. It's a kind of mafia tactic, isn't it? So either you do a bit more and you say, no, no, I can't let this go. I'm going to have to write to somebody. Okay, you write to the top kahuna or whatever his name is, and then they say come back and say no, and then you start to realize that you're getting some opposition or lack of cooperation around the place. I think somebody coming against me or direct challenge even, or just smears or you know that somehow your job is more difficult. Okay, that's how mafia works inside institutions and corporate structures. Okay, now I just want you to ask yourself: is that if that's what you're up against? You're up against that kind of those kind of bad actors in Opus Dei that just will tell you what your remit is and argue it till it's blue in the face and it doesn't cover them. Okay, and then they're not giving any ideas about how else to deal with things. Well, they don't seem to really care. They might say they care. They might say we've tried everything to help that Michael. We've tried everything. Oh, he doesn't. You know, he's just against the Catholic Church. He wants to kill the Catholic Church. But I've just posted a video about how the Catholic Church can deal with Opus Dei extremely easily. I say in a few months even, and would all be sorted out. Okay. So anyway, so I don't want to stop anybody worshipping in any building or any mass or anything like that. I'm not interested. I'm just not interested. Okay. I am interested in my fellow Catholics and their welfare and in their freedom. Okay. And I want to see what I can do with my talents, work with people with their talents. Okay. But I generally find that I'm into a place where at some level I come up against somebody's remit, okay, or somebody's got another remit from somewhere else that interferes, okay. And I want to make another challenge to you, okay. One of the things that I've done, the bits of spiritual progress I've made in my life recently is to try and become less detached from money, okay. And how have I done that? Well, the reality is, I've got lots and lots of financial paperwork and stuff like that I haven't dealt with. Okay, I haven't dealt with for a long time, and I can't really even face it at the moment. I haven't got a personal assistant. I could really do with one, and I'm just hoping that at some point somebody will come and help me and do that because I'm really rubbish at that. But I know that I'm going to have summonses for debts, car parking stuff, all that stuff that people have. Nothing serious. I've got stuff to deal with, and I can't bother with that. I'm really bad at admin. But I decided, this thing is more important. This particular mission at the moment is more important than me getting tied up with my own paperwork. I've got enough money from various sources to keep me going without working in a job at the moment, where I'd have a remit that would stop me doing what I'm doing. Um, so I am going to continue for some time until I start to see some real support coming. And then hopefully at that point everybody can work together. And I think that's the approach I'm going to take, no matter how high up in the hierarchy of the Catholic Church or in Opus Dei or in any other part of society who has a stake in this whole situation. We all need each other. We all need each other. We're all equals. None of us is better than anybody else. We're all dearly loved by God. We're precious in God's eyes, all the same. And God gives us mercy, especially when we shows mercy. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall have mercy shown them. So if anybody feels I haven't shown mercy, then please say. But if I don't want that to be an excuse for not stepping up, okay, not stepping up and seeing what you can do to help people who seem to be falling with it through remits. The people I know that care about at this moment are in coercive Opus Dei environments. Now, I know people in Opus Dei will not agree with me on that, okay, but there's sufficient evidence around that most people, ordinary people, would agree that those people are in coercive environments, and yet they're still there in the name of Catholicism. Okay, nobody in the Catholic Church is helping. or at least if they are, they're not telling me, so that I have to keep carry on. I have to keep hammering away, and that's what I'm going to be doing soon today. So I just, again, I beg, if you have a remit and it doesn't quite extend far enough, see what you can do to extend that remit. See what protection your employer can give you from, and some resources and time to give you to sort of break the deadlock, get other people talking, get everybody around the same table, get all the good actors to get their heads together and sort something out so that people like me aren't going to keep embarrassing you. So, and at the end of the day, if you can't do that, or there's so many interests, so it's spread so far that you just have to, be bold. Somebody has to be bold. Somebody else has to be bold and step out and blow the whistle. And it has to be public now because it's gone on for so long. Okay. So, um, so that's what I'm suggesting. I really, really mean that. I don't want to be unpopular with any Catholic official, but I know I am. But it's because you're not doing. There's a big safeguarding void here. You know it. Okay, you know it, and it's something that's been hushed up for too long. But you know what? Everybody in society has got a shady past to cover. So let's say we came out as Catholics and said we're going to deal with this honestly. Then at the beginning we'd have to face an awful lot of heat from an awful lot of people for not for hushing it up. But you know what? We're going to find out that probably quite a lot of people in other organisations like MPs and departments of state were told about Opus Dei problems a long time ago, and they've probably got lots of correspondence on file that can be revealed with freedom of information requests that indicate all that, and they didn't act on it. Okay. And what I'm saying is child grooming, vulnerable adults grooming, it will all tie up with all the complaints that people have made over the last 60 years in this country about Opus Dei. And so there'll be a ton of people implicated, and they haven't done the right thing either. So if they start to point the finger, then you can say, well, look, well, actually, we recorded this. So do some research about who else you've done. If they're going to point the fingers, tell them what they should have done or their predecessor should have done a long time ago. Okay. And then if other religions point the finger, we'll say, well, hang on a second. That's, we think that the same rules should apply to your religion too. And actually, there's some evidence around that they don't. Okay. So let's work together on that too. And the journalists, as well. So there'll be no end of people willing to point the finger. But as soon as you do a bit of research, you'll find that they've got all sorts of dirt that they're hiding as well. That happens even in politics, doesn't it? I was really disappointed that nobody came up with a Brexit manifesto because I've been reading about the Brexit side, about the different ways to get out of the EU steadily, okay? And I was really disappointed that we never had a Brexit manifesto. So the only basis on which people could vote for Brexit was xenophobia, and that's what happened. And now people are saying, "Oh, it's gone wrong." And it's not surprising. Nobody knew anything about how the European Union works. Nobody. So people who are criticizing now could have acted some time ago. So I've even joined Reform. I've joined Reform not because I'm particularly reform that way inclined. You can hear enough of me to think I'm not an idiot. But I've reported this, whistleblown this to my Conservative MP in Surrey, my Labour MP in Birmingham. I live in both places, and nothing. I told them about my personal safety problems. Nothing. Weren't interested. And I'd been in touch with the Conservative MP before about another issue, so she decided to go silent on me. So, um, so yeah, so that's why I'm getting to this desperate stage of thinking I need help from somebody that cares. And whatever you say about reform voters, they do care about their people, the English people. And what I'm doing here could have an impact on not just the Catholic Church but beyond. This is big stuff, really. So it's all about not pointing the finger. Jesus said, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." So that's something for all of us as Christians to remind each other of. And but sometimes if you carry on doing bad things, then you do get, there are good people can earn the right to cast stones, okay? Because the people, they're obstructing, they're stumbling blocks in the way of justice and mercy and love. Okay, so you can earn the right to cast stones. So, but you have to be without sin first, okay? You have to be righteous in God's eyes, okay? And then it's a question for each of us to decide if we or other people are righteous in God's eyes. And so that's one reason I'd like to meet more people. It's very difficult to meet people that will be willing to meet me in the flesh, because then they can get a feeling of how I am, not just from these videos, to see if I'm a nice guy in the flesh. I haven't come across many people who say I'm a really, really bad actor. So, and if anybody's saying that I'm a really bad actor and I really just want to destroy things, then I want to meet those people, okay? Meet those people so I can have it out with them, and they can take a view on me, and they can say they've met me, and they're still sure I'm a bad actor. And I haven't met. There's lots of people in Opus Dei I haven't met for years. So, but if Opus Dei running scared, they might be doing that. It's this kind of thing they do. It's a well-known tactic to smear, saying he's an evil guy, he's evil. So you just I'll leave it with you. I really think that the renewal of the Catholic Church, in a way which deals with the problems of Opus Dei, even if it means setting up a new church to isolate Opus Dei and then inviting the Pope to join the new church, something crazy like that. Even if it takes that, it will be a brave move. It will be very radical. It will be very honest and cleansing, and it will be a great service to the rest of society, because there's plenty of other religious organizations that are hurting a lot more children and vulnerable adults in this country and around the world on a regular basis. Now, I'll tell you something I've forgotten about. When I first became a teacher of English as a foreign language, one of the things I did, I advertised myself in Gumtree, and I met somebody who's a anti-FGM campaigner. I won't say what FGM is, but I'm sure people here will know. And she needed help to produce a document for her campaign, and I helped her to get National Lottery funding to write a book of oral histories of people from her community, her ethnic community that has a lot of FGM in it, really a lot. Not in this country, but outside it. Um, but there's some of them have come here and have taken refuge, and she wrote took their histories. I didn't obviously didn't go near them, but she needed my help to write it. So it was a more editing job. And between the two of us, we produced this book. It's called The Bright and Dark Colors of My Life. And it's histories is the personal histories of ladies with FGM, and who've come here, and then all these ladies want to do is share their culture because they love their culture. They share. They also talk about their culture, their dances and henna paintings and all that stuff. And then they produced a bit. They got some artwork, and they had an exhibition. They were disappointed that not more, local British people came, but they did. They really want to integrate, and it's really hard for them. But one of the ways that they can do that is to share their stories of their cultures and their pain, and they find that much better than. And there are ways through that, because actually Muslims don't, but imams don't actually support FGM. It's something which is not known often, and so they prefer to do that than be lectured at by by healthcare professionals. Okay, and I put a huge amount of time and effort into that, loads and loads and loads of time. That's 6 months, and I got paid £1,000 for that. Okay, so if I calculated the time, it's probably like you know £2 an hour or something like that. But I didn't care because I loved doing that work. Okay, and I can show that book to anybody who asks me. I spoke to her the other day, and I said to her what I was doing, and I think she was a bit shocked that I was talking about reform. Um, but I'm really desperate. I'm really desperate. So I've applied to become a Reform MP. I've just joined it. I've applied to become a Reform MP because it might be the easiest way to get into Parliament. So, but you can see what the kind of guy I am. Got earrings, studs everywhere, blue and pink. You've heard enough to know what kind of guy I am. That I'm a maybe a ball buster, but I'm a consensus builder as well. And so, are there people out there that want to build consensus with me and listen to me and take a view on me? As a policeman, police people do that. They just take a view. Yeah, that person sounds all right. They're not bullshitting us. Okay, well, if they've done something wrong, they're going to say, look, okay, I did it, and then you can like, okay, well, let's find a way. It's that sort of level. Okay, so just thank you again for listening to my rantings.